Shall we prophesy?
Let's do it.
Excuse me while I'm going. Right. I think it's just the moment where we have to say to each other that, boy, is it stormy. Boy, is it stormy. It's stormy in the atmosphere. I think that our weather patterns are responding to what's happening emotionally and spiritually. And there is a sense of people being shaken, feeling particularly rattled. It's not an easy time to anchor yourself deeply and to be unshaken. I think the atmosphere of stress roundabout and shakenness and stormy, let's just use the word stormy. It's a stormy time. Some of you are saying, yes, Patricia, I think you're right, inside and out. And that makes your body, I think, sometimes more susceptible to passing germs. So I think we need to warfare this morning around that. I think actually you then get a different level of fatigue, and your body doesn't always work with you whenever your emotions and your spirit are processing. And so somebody, Tom Peters, is saying, I'm literally sitting in a thunderstorm right now. So I just want to say this is normal for where we are right now. And I think we just acknowledge it together. And if you have any of those things, you can just wave at me in the comments so we know that we've got the right people on. That sense of either, look, I just feel disproportionately fatigued, or my body is not exactly doing what I want it to do. And we just go, it's the warfare and it's the season and we're all together in it. And I do think you can feel peculiarly isolated.
Yeah.
You can get, oh, is this just me? Am I just a basket case? Am I just like falling apart? And you can retreat back into a sense of isolation, which just makes everything feel worse when you're on your own. And I want just to be honest with you this morning, this afternoon, this evening, and say, this is just the season.
Yeah.
And I want to give some context for why. And then we're going to make sure that we pray for each other today, so that we are together in our understandings and together in just acknowledging that we are battling right now. Yep. Somebody's describing it. I think, Pauline, that's quite an interesting description. You're saying you're a bit edgy. I think you're probably summating it successfully for us all. Physically under par, but not awful. I think, Pauline Grant, that's a very, very helpful explanation. A bit edgy, physically under par, but not awful. And I think that's we're all kind of nodding and going, that's probably where we're at. And somebody saying, already feeling better to know I'm not the only one. Yes. And somebody, hi, Debbie, struggling to shift colds, feeling physically low. And I think we're aware that some of the stuff that's happening in the world is not about just a break and lift, but actually some of the stuff that's happening around the world is unfortunately about to get worse. Okay. Because we're talking about world wars. So right now, what we're doing is just having a good old cup of tea together and saying, how are we going to help each other deal with where we are? Over to you, Ruth and Sam. Speaking of colds, while I blow my nose.
I'm the same. I was doing the same there. Sorry. Like how
be on the main screen.
Very glamorous.
Very glamorous.
A live demonstration of the season. No, but it is a really odd season, and I think for us, if we can be really honest, for those of us who love the prophetic, we love the high energy life. This sort of season can be frustrating because we feel like our level of output isn't quite where we want it to be. I feel like I'm not quite achieving fullness. I feel like I'm not quite hitting the mark. I feel like I'm constantly under where my usual level of productivity or output or decision making or leadership stride usually is. I feel like I'm always slightly under that. And I do think in wartime and storm time, you have to be really good at knowing where there's grace and knowing where there isn't. And you've got to be really good at constantly asking God, every day, not just, once a month, but what is there grace for today? Where is there
Yes.
energy today? Where do you want me to apply my weight, to apply my decisions, to apply my focus? Because otherwise you'll find yourself applying your weight to where there isn't grace, and you'll then just get frustrated at yourself. You'll get upset at yourself, and you may go in a shame spiral or an anger spiral of, well, how can I do this? And my productivity is low and my output is low. And in storms, we learn and need to learn a greater dependency of fellowshipping with the Spirit, where we know this is where there's grace, this is where there isn't grace, this is where there is Spirit of God capacity in me, and this is where there's not. And it changes every day. And so I want to acknowledge, and I want us to acknowledge together, that in storm time, in wartime, your level of output will be different from in peacetime. And it's not that your productivity goes down, it's just that you need to be more intentional on the one or two areas where there's grace, and not spread yourself too thin or apply your weight wrongly to many things. Instead, you put your weight to where God says, there's grace.
Ruth, can you and I quiz Sam on that? Because I would like us to be quite practical.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sam, if we're not going to fire you questions, because there is this sense that productivity and fruitfulness is very different in wartime and peacetime.
Absolutely.
But in peacetime, you're well slept, you're well rested, you've had your vitamin C and D, you've taken your supplements, you're planting and you're harvesting and you're in those kind of rhythms. In wartime, the atmospheric tension is ratcheted right up. And so can I say, what does that practically look like? If you're saying, well, I've got to be productive, I've got to achieve something, but I'm not going to maybe achieve in the same way that I did in a peacetime. Talk me through very practically.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The measures are change. So it's not that you're not going to be productive. It's not that you're not going to be fruitful. It's not that you're not going to have output. I actually think we are coming into our most significant days where real long-lasting fruit will come. The measures change. For me, here is the number one word that I am always using with myself, and it's the word assignment. What is my assignment right now, and what is my assignment today? So yesterday, I knew that I had a word. Let me talk to you about my life. I knew I had a word for our Raising Prophets Year 2. And I knew I had to say some things, and I had to set a scene, and I had to prophesy for an hour and a half on some sort of on this particular word for them with where they were at. That completely changed my expectations of my day yesterday. And it's not that everything goes out the window, but I was very intentional at doing things that wouldn't drain me in advance of what I needed to do in the evening with the year twos. And there's this sense of that, in my job, that particular task, whether it was an email thing or a scheduling thing, I can put that into tomorrow's workload, because I know that today my weight needs to be applied to this particular call. Personally, there are then some conversations where, we talked about my wedding. I'm able to say to Bella, I'm not able to make a decision on that right now. Can we have that conversation tomorrow? I know that my weight needs to be applied somewhere else, that there's grace for something else. Can we make those decisions tomorrow? Can we have those discussions tomorrow about what is coming up? And the openness with, I think, is the recognition my capacity is changing each day, and I need to dialogue about where there's grace and where there's not. So that's what it looked like for me, even just yesterday.
Yeah, that's good. I hear you saying, Sam, that it's a time for focusing on assignments, tuning into where the grace is. Tell me, how do you make your peace then with the things that you just have to set to the side, or you're not going to get to, or it's not going to be done well? Like, how do you make peace with that?
Well, I think that we have duties. So it's not that I abandon, oh, that's not my assignment, so I'm not going to answer emails for a month. It's not that you do that. That's, we have jobs, we're employed, we have tasks, and actually you have to fulfill responsibilities. But it's understanding there are days where there is a grace to just get things done. I think we have that, and you just have to do it and get your head down. But there are other days where you have an assignment, and there is the sense of, no, you have to achieve something measurable and something significant and something specifically asked of by God. And that does change where you and how you focus your mind.
Yeah, for me, and then I come to you, and it was, I think the question of what is the right day to make a decision is really important. You can feel really pressurized to make decisions. And there are some things that I have to say to David, look, it's not that day. Today is not the decision day for that particular thing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you got to know when you need more reflection and more time and more sleep before you dive in. I used to have, I've got, Sam, you and I are wired very similarly in that you and I have, notebooks. I have, this is my prophetic word notebook. Yeah. Oh yeah, you bought that in Barnes and Noble. I think I was with you. And or we're the same. These are pages and pages and pages of prophetic words. And I used to do the same over to-do lists. I have more of these size books than I would like to tell you. But I've totally altered how I frame things in that I now have to-do lists that are more like this size and that are very disposable. And the sense for me of writing down, look, God, what do you really have grace on? And what do I really have to take a decision on? And things that, and so what I have on my list in a wartime season are things like, oh, Ruth Weller, you're on this list in a very lovely way. Okay. I got this box called Social, and the things of, what would be good for my heart to do, so that it's not just all about output. And I have, what would be good for social, dinner with the Ringlands and the Wellers.
Yes, please.
That's literally what I've written down. So that there is this sense of, things that I'm proactively writing down, because I know that I have to have things in my life that are healthy encouragements.
Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm.
So there you are, friends, on the list, as well as a whole load of calendar dates and a whole load of people to text. Yeah. So I do think it's that practical. Ruth, over to you.
I'm exactly the same. I've literally got those lists in my bag, and I've even got that. Do you know that stationery that maps out your day hour by hour? I've started doing that in mornings, because otherwise my mind just gets swamped, and I'm like, right, I just need to know, have I hit the things? Doesn't mean I always hit the things, but I've been doing that this week. Right, surviving the storms. I think the phrase that comes to my mind is the lightness of the feet, the quickness to change pace. And, in a storm season, sometimes you're going down a certain path and then the weather changes and you're like, oh, this is not what I thought was going on. And if you get bogged down in but this was the plan, you're not going to thrive and you're not going to make it. Like, there needs to be a quickness to pivot, a quickness, a lightness on the feet to switch direction according to what the Spirit really is doing. And so, just like Sam was talking about, really fellowshipping with the Spirit to know, where is the grace? What do I touch? What do I not? I think in the same way, there needs to be a personal flexibility to yield to that and to be open to switching plans, even week to week. And so I find myself in intense moments like this, just constantly stepping back and saying, Spirit, am I right on track, or do I need to actually change these pieces around a little bit? And to choose to be flexible with that. Otherwise, you're just going to get pummeled by it all changed and this isn't what I expected.
Yes. We had a staff meeting some months ago where we wrote, this is ridiculous. I remember the facial expression of Louise Robinson, who does our HR advice, and Dan Graham. Hi, Dan, if you're watching, our finance director, because they were the ones tasked with writing this into our work contracts. We actually have in our staff handbook, and please, you need to let me know if anybody else has this, because it was quite a difficult policy to write. We have spiritual warfare days, which we call victory days. And I don't know how we came to this, but he's watching. Hi, Dad. We love you. But we acknowledge the fact within the staff, how do I express this? That sometimes the spiritual battle is so great that some of the staff are like, victory days, yay. You actually need a spiritual warfare day. So we felt it was wrong to call it spiritual warfare days because we didn't want to to create more warfare. So we landed on the word victory day. So my staff, if the battle is ridiculous and it's different for everybody and they're not allowed to be at it, they can apply for or take a victory day to just regroup and reset individually.
That is so good. But what I love now is that people always ask for victory days. They're like, can I have a victory day? Can we have a victory day after this? I love that that's a question.
It's in the culture now, isn't it?
No, but it is rewarding, and I do love the language. It's a victory day. We achieve something, and sometimes the day is I actually need space to war. Sometimes the day is I actually need space to sit and what we just did and to enjoy it. And we see the extremes. Even Daniel, he took a week off. 10 days, wasn't it? After he had a vision. Which is brilliant. He had to sleep, but the sense of sitting in it and the rhythms, the intention to not dismiss what you've just achieved and to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and it's setting you up with a overcoming mindset, because I think sometimes in Christian organizations, especially prophetic circles, we're so quick to be like, oh, there's a battle, oh, there's a war, oh, look at all of this that we're coming up against. And if we don't frame it from, yeah, but we're the victorious ones, it will crush you. So we almost I feel like even in us putting that in the staff handbook, it sows this culture piece into our team that, no, we're victorious ones. And sometimes we just need a moment to be the victorious ones.
Yes. I mean, I actually think that Dan, hi Dan, thought we were maybe joking when we first raised it. Dan, where are you in the comments? Because of course he's got to oversee all of this. And it's Jennifer, hi Jennifer over in Asia. I think, are you Singapore? Jennifer, I can't remember. But you're saying a bit like a toil day. Well, we actually have toil days as well when we've all worked hard at a conference. This is actually slightly different in that it is this sense of an understanding. Can I say this? For you guys watching, you have kept believing in Jesus Christ against the odds on occasions. You have kept turning up and worshiping and praying, though it drained you. You have watched what is going on in the nations, and some days it would be easier to just jolly well bury your head in the sand. And so there is a sense of, sorry, I'm just reading one of your comments and it's giving, sorry, Ruth, you need to
you guys are just so good. You bring us so much joy.
Just to be honest.
I kind of lost my train of thought as well there.
Sorry, right.
I need to come
David, you need to.
Sometimes victory is just to lose yourself laughing because you guys
to enjoy the victory.
Oh, man.
Keep going, Ruth.
We're in the storms. We need to have a victorious mindset. Do you know what's funny talking about this? I remember years ago having a vision of war in our city. I think it was about 15 years ago. This was a long time ago. And I heard the Lord saying then, in times of crisis, you have to schedule in nights that will make you laugh. You have to schedule in like funny things or like community get-togethers, like like talent shows and comedy and all that kind of stuff, because in days of intensity and war, like, you have to keep yourself going. You have to get that light relief, or you're never going to make it. You're going to get bogged down by the intensity. I think that's kind of what we're in just now. Like, life is intense. There's a lot going on, and sometimes you just need to break it with laughter.
Right. Well, I was saying you guys are hilarious in the comments. But sometimes you're just turning up is good enough. And the acknowledgement that you are presently loving Jesus is brilliant. I need to write a book on some of your most hilarious comments. There was a whole episode where you guys were talking about the well-being of somebody's rabbit. And that made me giggle quite a lot. That's kind of tattooed in our brain. Anyway, moving on. The other thing I think right now is... Sorry.
The other thing.
Focus.
Listen to David in the background.
Come and give a talk to.
I haven't heard the rabbit story. I don't know what that one is.
You don't want to hear the rabbit
I don't
story.
want to hear it. No.
Hi, David.
Hello.
Right. What are your top tips for storms, David?
Top tips for storms, David. Help us out.
Top tips for riding the storms. I loved I loved what Ruth said earlier about the ability to pivot, but that's great in theory. But sometimes we feel in these moments that your feet are actually stuck to the ground, and you're like, I just cannot move. So it's the tips to actually get your feet off that stuck position, and it always comes back to me to worship, that reconnecting and reconnecting to that place of worship. Because if you are stuck to the earth, you have to get magnetized back to heaven. You have to be magnetized to the spiritual realm, and for me, only worship can do that.
Yes.
Oh, that's very good. I like that. So you float in the glory. Right, now we're going to say something very helpful now.
About the flexibility.
Right, okay. No,
that is really important, though, what Ruth was saying there about the pivot and the need to change. And I was talking to the RPs last night, the prophets. I think there are three things that we hold too tightly that you can't hold on to when you are in a season of storms, and that is identity, call, vision. And we can almost think of them as a magic potion. If we get those three things sorted, then I'm done for life. But actually, in the storms, you've got to be flexible enough to say, what identity do I need to occupy in this season to be able to achieve this? What's my call right now? What's my vision for the moment? And to not get so, God's told me 15 years ago this one thing, and I'm not going to move according to the season. But the flexibility to pivot, to change according to the story God wants to write in a moment.
I do feel that God is asking us to reshift a lot of what our hands touch right now.
I agree.
And I do think that's quite personally debilitating. And can I tell you, for my own journey, the sense there of God saying, you've held on, you've done well. Now I need greater authority from you. Now I need greater demonstrations of power from you. Now I need to put greater weight on you for intercession. Now I need you to move house. Now I need you to realign. Now I need you to cut out some relationships. Now I need you to not go back and take a seat at the table that I sovereignly removed you from. Now I need you to regather friends in a different way. Now I need you to rethink how you allocate your money. Now I need you to think about the internal decoration of your house, because you're going to be there in a different way. Now I need you to buy bigger pots and pans in your kitchen, because legitimately I need you to start to feed some people for your own well-being. Now I need you on the street doing evangelism. Now I need you stewarding national level prophetic words. Now I need you. And you can feel, as the storms of the war are coming, that yes, we're talking about lists and what I've got grace for, but I think what is unsettling most of us is not actually, is Israel bombing Hamas, and is Hamas going after Jews, and is there a rise of anti-Semitism in the world? All of that is a big yes, yes, yes. And that doesn't help. But I do think that the riding of the storms is the internal shaking of God, where he is actually saying, I need you to come up. And I think that feels incredibly discombobulating, because I'm going to have to be a different version of myself when actually I'm only just about doing okay where I am. And I think sometimes the compromised immunity and sometimes the sleep deprivation or the inability to sleep is because I do think there is a wrestle going on in your inner man that you may not have given language to, that is asking for something more from you than you have, and than you have yet stepped into. And that is incredibly brave. And it is that sense of, sometimes I do need to sleep and I need a victory day or a spiritual warfare reset rest day, very legitimately. But other times I've got to know, do I just need to step out? And is my compromise kind of immunity or whatever else is going on actually a side effect of the fact that I am hanging back and not being brave, and that my wellness comes in my obedience?
That's good.
I do think that's desperately in the mix of riding the storms. And can I tell you, I remember, Sam, you were there whenever we did, this is meant, David, you can give me the dates on it, the very, very first time we ever did a 5-day school. And this is years and years ago. And I remember thinking, I don't know that I can write a program for a 5-day school. I don't know that people will come in and pay and journey and travel and stay in Glasgow for an introduction to the prophetic. This is before I wrote my first book. And the sense of the Herculean bravery it took to step into that back in the day. And I remember the first time we did a 5-day school. When was that, David? It was years ago, probably a decade ago now. And thinking, people have traveled to Glasgow. What are we doing? But I remember the internal Herculean decision that it took. 2015, yeah. And then I remember the same thing whenever we shifted from training the prophet, the prophetic gift, to training the prophet and running the first the prophet school, And I did a trial year with some of our own local people. And I remember thinking, it was the next building on. And I remember thinking, I don't know that I can do this. I really don't know that I can train the prophets. And I remember saying to David, how am I going to write a syllabus? And then, of course, now it's the one of the main things that we do. Can I tell you, I'm exactly in the same place. I actually said to David late yesterday, I said to David, look, I am going to have to start to do war broadcasts. I am not sure that I am quite in the mindset of 2 new broadcasts a week, but broadcasting on the state of the nations and war, because I know what it's going to take. And there is something, I think, that God says, look, you're going to come alive when you do the brave thing that I put in you to do. So I'm just telling you honestly, but for you, you'll have your own version of that. Ruth.
I'd be curious to know as well, and you can tell me in the comments, or you don't have to if this is personal, but I wonder how many people have not yet stepped into what God has spoken over your life, or the big thing that God has called you to step into. Wonder how many of you have not made that step yet because you think, I'm not strong enough, I'm not well enough, I'm not ready. But then in not stepping in, are you still sitting in your weakness and in your unwellness? Because I really hear you, Emma, on what you're saying there. And I've seen this a lot, even just in years of being in church and watching people identify their call and step up and take bold, risky steps. And I see this pattern where God just calls people in weakness, and God calls people in humility. And there's always that wrestle with, oh, but Lord, can I do it? Or can we do it? Is it ready? Can I bear the cost? But actually, when it is the Lord, when it's truly the Lord calling it, I just see this pattern where those who take a step in, God then meets them with the strength and the inner resilience and the resources that is needed to be faithful. And so though it may be a hard step, it's like there's a wellness and there's a life and there's a thriving that comes with it. But yet I've seen so many people as well who never take that step, and so actually sit back in a bit of a lostness and a bit of a confusion. And so I think you're onto something there, Emma, that this is a moment of great, I don't know, I guess a sense of vulnerability. I think everyone feels their own humanness and vulnerability. And yet, in these days, I think God is changing calls, birthing new visions, calling up the new.
Yes.
And it may be that you have to take that step to step into thriving in this kind of storm.
And do you not think, Ruth, because obviously you've led a church and so we're all in leadership is the point I'm making, that actually I do think that there's an awful lot of people round about us who have leadership calls who never hit the stride of that. And then by the time they get to their 40s and 50s and 60s, feel, and you'll have led many of them, where you're coaching them as their church leader, and or they come to you as an intern, however they present themselves, and you see something great in them, and they are just never able to shift. And I think it's the great tragedy of the people of God, the inability to say, I am not ready, I am not educated enough, I am not, and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Understanding that it is in my weakness that actually he reveals his strength, rather than, of course, Debbie, you're right, people are never too old. But I do think people have a lot of wasted and missed years. That the point of it is, if you can do it all, you have no God gap. And I do think what is happening in the nations right now, with the war stuff, is we have a lot of frail leaders who are coming to the end, and a lot of leaders who are about to be exposed. And we have a lot of leaders, even in the political arena, that don't have the wisdom that's needed for this season. And the church is going to have to lead. Now, if I just fire out at you, the church is going to have to lead, I'm sure I'll get, yes, applause in the comments. But that then drills down to a leadership mantle on a lot of us, who then have to say, oh, actually, I'm the church, I need to lead. So, and we miss that connect. Of course, the church needs to lead, but somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah.
No. And I do wonder whether we're in the riding of the storms, as we've titled this episode. Yes, you're going to have to rest in the right ways and do what's anointed in the moment, and all of that. But you are also going to have to figure out what your leadership in this next epoch looks like.
Yeah.
Look, and anybody who has stepped out into something that God has called them to do will testify that prior to stepping into that space, they didn't have what was necessary for the role. They didn't feel qualified. And there is something that wakes up in you. There is a sense of, I am resourced. Though I feel weak, there is a resourcing by the Spirit of God internally once you fully step into that role. And so for you, Emma, it wasn't until you fully stepped into, I will raise these prophets, that probably the syllabus started to get downloaded, and that you started to understand. Ruth, when you stepped into leading and planting a church, you probably didn't feel like, I have all that it takes, until the moment you stood into that space, you took to the platform, you led the church, and something woke up in you where you had what the assignment required, and you had what the moment required. And many of us are waiting and stuck in the waiting room, stuck in the waiting space, and we're waiting for something of a lightning bolt from heaven to land in us, to qualify us fully, before we make the bravery to shift our call or to step up and into an opportunity that God has laid before us. And it never, ever, 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 ever happens like that. And I love, like Jeremiah 1, when God comes up to Jeremiah and he says, you're called, and Jeremiah says, I'm only a boy. And God doesn't turn round to Jeremiah and say, oh, don't say that. You're not only a boy. You're amazing, and you're a great speaker, and you have the best voice in the world. He says, your call is to say what I say to you. That's his only pep talk. His only pep talk is do what I've asked you and do it dependent on me. Say what I say to you. He didn't negotiate him by saying, well, you're amazing, aren't you, Jeremiah? You have such a way with words. He said, just say what I'm going to say. And the space that God is asking us into, and the leadership space, you will not feel qualified for until you step into it, and it will wake up a sense of I am resourced by the Spirit of God when you move into that space.
Yeah, and I want to add to that as well. There's a testing in that. Am I willing to follow God even when I feel like I've not got everything I need to do it? And again, this only works when He really has called you to. We can't all just decide, well, I'm going to do something that I'm not qualified for. It's like, no, when there's a word of the Lord that says, step this way, will you really follow Him even in your weakness? And I'll tell you my story, actually. You mentioned there, Sam. I stepped into, I was planted a church in 2019. And I had, at the time, I had been leading an existing church that was a thriving, growing church with an amazing staff team. I think we had, about 12 people in the staff team at one point. Which is a big size for Scotland. And we started internships. There was, all sorts of things going on there. And yet there was a call of God to move to a different part of the city, to buy an old church building and to start a new church in it. And everything about that, I was like, I am not the one for that. Like, I've never church planted. I don't want to take on an old building. I have young children who are like preschoolers. My husband is starting a new business. Like everything about this journey, I was just like, I don't have what it takes. I'll stay in my comfortable leadership position with my amazing church that's already built. Like, I don't know if I want to step out of my comfort zone and start something new. I'm not sure if it's going to work out. But do you know what God showed me? And I never would have thought this would speak to me. I have not been a fan over the years of youth group dramas at Christmas. Like, this is not my thing. This is not my vibe. Everything about youth group dramas at Christmas makes me go, ooh, like, it's not my thing. But yet, that Christmas, where I had to make some decisions about, right, am I staying where I am or am I going again and pioneering a new thing? The youth group did a drama in which they had a 14-year-old girl acting as Mary. And this 14-year-old girl, pretends to be pregnant and then had the baby. And I just found this image so disturbing because, I've got wee kids. I know how hard it is to be pregnant and to give birth. And I just thought it is so disturbing to watch a 14-year-old girl acting like a pregnant woman and having a baby in a stable. And everything about this drama impacted me with the like, ugh, this is awful. But then it's like I had this revelation where I was like, wait, but Mary was probably a 14-year-old girl who wasn't yet married, who was rejected by society, who was kicked out of her home and had to go somewhere else. It was almost like this download of like everything about birthing the Messiah was disturbing and weird and not ideal, and she probably did not feel like the best qualified mother. And yet that's the vehicle through which God decided to enter the world in human form, And I had this whole revelation that actually it's more often that God births new things and works through unideal circumstances, imperfect people, rejection from society, even people that are not qualified. Like Mary had never had a kid before. She didn't know how to be a mom. She wasn't even married. And I was like, right, if Mary can birth the Messiah, surely I can go and start a church. Like, surely.
Yeah, as an adult.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. As an adult. I mean, that's this stark reality of where we are. I want to address some of the comments on this. There's some interesting kind of like repetitive thoughts, which is very helpful to see where you guys are. And I do appreciate you commenting. There's a couple of, I'm alone type. Do I do this alone by myself? And the answer is yes, get on with it. And seriously, whenever I started in Scotland, there was no prophetic people that I knew. I didn't know a prophet in Scotland, really. There weren't any, as far as I was aware. There was nobody who was doing prophetic ministry. There is now. There wasn't back then. And all I had was I wouldn't even put it as a very clear word of the Lord. I had an instinct that the voice of God mattered, and that I wanted to swim in the waters of, could we hear the voice of God more, and could I start a prophetic school? And actually, was it obedience to a massive piece of clarity? No. It was more an instinct of, I can't sit here doing nothing. And the sense of, I don't have agreement, I don't have buy-in, because it didn't exist. And surely that is the nature of pioneering. If it already existed and there was already agreement, you wouldn't be a pioneer. So we have this bizarre sense of, I must have buy-in and I must have agreement and there must be something already that I can reflect. No, that's not pioneering. That's franchising or copying. Okay. So pioneering really is, you're sort of on your own. Now you can join our, network, and at least you've got connection. But some of you are going to have to be brave with you and your best friend, and that is it. Yeah. Okay. And I don't even know that I was particularly afraid. I just was incredibly naive. And how hard can it be? I mean, how hard can it be, thought I, to run a prophetic school? Little did I know. Okay. So, and the other piece that I'm seeing a fair bit is, a few of you are saying, quite a lot of you are saying, I don't know what my call is. Now, I do have some top tips on that. So, guys, that usually means you're not in the right relationships, because whenever Saul had prophetic words. Do you remember prophetic words? He was going to be king. Samuel had prophesied over Saul, you're going to be. He could not get it. And I would suggest that some of you have probably heard from God, or you've got prophetic words, and you're not getting it. It's exactly like Saul, and that's okay. Okay. So you've maybe gone to a prophetic conference, you've got a word, or you've had a dream, but you're still not quite, I'm not sure. Okay. That's Saul in scripture. And what happens is he goes to where the prophets are, and it is not until he is in the right atmosphere that the prophetic word is fully activated.
Yeah.
And can I tell you, I would love to say, oh, you can be activated where you are. Clearly, scripturally, that is not always true. Sometimes you can only get activated by those who understand some basic biblical principles, that everybody has a place, that the kingdom of God is limitless, that it's expanding. Okay. Yeah. And so sometimes you need to find, even for a short while, that like Saul did with the company of prophets in Samuel, sometimes you need to find that atmosphere. You don't necessarily need to live there, but sometimes you need to touch that atmosphere for what is already in you to be activated. And for some of you, you're going to have to ask the Lord, where do I need to go? Or what atmosphere do I need to be put in? Is there people around me that think like that what's in me can be activated? And some of you, until you have a look around for that atmosphere to come into that atmosphere, will always feel a little bit like, I'm not really sure what I do now. Sam, Ruth.
Absolutely. Look, even there were even places where Jesus couldn't perform miracles. There were places that even shut down Jesus' ability to be who he was called to be. Mark 6:5, he could do no mighty works there. There were places where that was shut down, and we have to get much more savvy and discerning that place and space has a massive impact on what we are called to do. And your call, your destiny happens in a place, it happens in a space. And actually, some of you have assignments that are assigned to territories, spaces whether they be a territory of, a place of influence, or territory as in physical soil, which most of the time it is. There are spaces where you are assigned and where your call can only fully come alive once you have moved into it. And we have to get brave with movement. And I think, we could talk about immigration, we could talk about refugees, but what does the Bible tell us about movement? The Bible is a story of people constantly on the move, according to their call and according to their destiny. And whether it's Ruth and Naomi and the finding of Boaz, or it's Esther moving from the outer court to the inner court, or it's Saul pursuing the prophetic troop coming down the mountain, or it's Abraham going to the land that he sees, or going up the side of the mountain with his son to sacrifice him while a ram comes up the other side. This movement. And yet I think in Western Christianity, we are so static in one space. I found my forever place. I found my forever space. And God is like, that's not quite how I work. I move on a people to move them around into the right places and spaces. And so my question would be, if you have been trying to make something work for 18 months to 3 years and there has still been no movement, you are not the problem. Your place and your space probably is. And you need to start asking questions about that and having the bravery to shift to the right space and place that God is inviting you into.
Yeah, and I would add to that, don't underestimate the significance of even short-term trips to get out of your space and to grab onto something from elsewhere. Because, like these guys are saying, sometimes you need to get in with the right people to see something activated in you. Sometimes you just need to get out of your own territory, come out from under what is there, and identify what are the blind spots that you have when you are in your usual space. And when I think back on a lot of my discernment moments, at pivot moments, at shifts in my call, usually these things have come after a trip, either out the country or just like to another part of the country. Because there's something so significant about stepping out with the territorial realities of where you are. And it's almost like you're not vulnerable to things in another place that you are there, but also you're more open to things. And God shows you things either by pointing at this is what you're going for elsewhere, or by saying, now that you're out of your context, don't you appreciate what I'm doing there and you didn't see it like that before? And so I would encourage anyone as well, if you're looking at right, I feel lost, I don't think I'm activating, or what I'm putting my hand to, it's not growing, it's not multiplying. I would say, would you consider, even if it's not I'm moving my whole life right now, what does it look like to do a very intentional discernment journey and say, right, I'm going to this place to seek the Lord, to listen to him, to get perspective, to mix with other people so that I can make a decision about what's next.
Yeah. It's interesting. I never got to on Sunday morning, but I wrote it in my notes when Hannah and I were looking at the spirit of fear. And the first thing I wrote was, we are lives lived in constant change. We are lives lived in constant flux. We are aging and our body is in continual movement. Our jobs change, our relationships move, our geography shifts. We are always more in a process than we see. We are always more on a journey than we are comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing I wrote before the Lord on Sunday morning when I was in prep. And the fact that Christ is in me, I am clothed in him. He is the rock under my feet. He's the cornerstone. Eternity is in my heart. And the sense then of my stability being in him and in my eternity, meaning that my stability is not always therefore or ever in bricks and mortar or in connections right here, right now. And I wonder whether we are more faithful to a geography than we are faithful to the call of God.
Yeah.
And more faithful to our comfort and more faithful to the art of confirmation than we are faithful to pioneering and risk. And can I say, guys, as we wrap this up, riding the storms, yes, some of you need to sleep. Yes, some of you need victory days. Yes, some of you need to lay hands on your body and pray for your immunity and all of the things that we've said. But I do think that God is asking a bride and a remnant right now to ride the storms by getting themselves rightly positioned. And I think this sense of waiting on the Lord for a word when he's already spoken is probably foolishness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Any other comments? Prophets?
Really good. And can I just ask, just for people who are commenting that, was your call and the sense of God speaking to you about both of your calls, when it first came, was it a big booming light or a visitation or a dream? Or was there just this inner gnawing sense of, I think this is what I'm meant to do? And the internal pull towards something. How did it come? Because I think that's important, because people are going here, but I need to wait on a word. And actually my instinct is you probably already have it. It is an internal gnawing, an internal drive towards something, rather than the lightning beam or the visitation or the big all singing, all dancing dream.
Yeah. I would describe it as drips of revelation and then threads of passion and desires that pull it together. Yeah. And so at every point where I have assessed, what am I called to do in this moment? What am I stepping it into? I always look back at what are almost like the jigsaw puzzle pieces of what God has said. And very rarely are they joined together in a very neat, you're going to do this and it's going to look like this and this is how you're going to do it. It's more like pull these pieces and then tie them together with, what do I burn for? Like, what am I excited for? What am I disturbed by? And it's almost like you put together this mosaic. And then even then I always say, like, I have to step out in faith and give it a go to see whether I got it right. Because I trust that if I have misunderstood what God's asking me to do, when I step into it, I'll hit a wall, or He won't bless it if I've got it wrong. And sometimes you need to step out to see, does it take off or does it not? But you get refined in your vision through that process.
Can I say something that's going to sound very strange for a prophet? Davis immediately put his head in his hands. I can fucking sense his like, oh, where is she going already? Okay, can I tell you this? Did I need a prophetic word to pray? No, I did not. I already had it here. Did I get a prophetic word to give? No, I already had it in my Bible. Did I need a prophetic word to marry my husband? No, I didn't. I already understood how character and godliness was defined here, and he met the criteria because of the written word of God. So how did I start Glasgow Prophetic Centre? Because the word of the Lord said to desire prophecy.
Yeah.
I didn't actually have a thus says the Lord at all. I just read it in here that I was supposed to desire prophecy. So I just did it because it said it here.
Yeah.
And it was literally that straightforward. I didn't get clarification. I didn't necessarily seek confirmation. And I just did it because the Bible told me to do it. So, you know, sometimes we just make some things incredibly complicated. You know, and here we are. Look, prophets, if you're a prophet and I've trained you, can I just tell you that the job description for the prophet is the last verse. Oh, I've got so many end notes in this Bible. Revelation is nearly in the middle of the book in my Bible. The job description for the prophet is the last verse of Revelation 10. where it just says, where John is flicking back pages, he says, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. Can I tell you, if John 10 in the last verse tells me that I'm supposed to prophesy over peoples, nations, languages, and kings, do I need a word of the Lord to prophesy over a nation?
No.
It already tells me. So what Bible is this? Oh my goodness, there's a study Bible that's ridiculously too heavy, and the text is too small. It's just a Zondervan and every Zondervan study Bible. Anyway, it's massive. So I think it is that sense, guys, and we have gone over our R. Some of us are not just disobedient to do confirmation. We're just disobedient at the most basic introductory level to the actual word of the Lord.
What a concluding remark.
Pardon?
That's a concluding remark.
That's a concluding remark. We're literally just disobedient to the Logos word of God, where it says build or prophesy or, pray or
work
give.
Miracles.
Or work miracles or demonstrate the kingdom or, and you and I are like, I don't have the right people around me and I didn't have a confirmation and I don't feel ready. And yet literally I could drop this Bible in your head and it would make no difference. Anyway, sorry.
It's good though, like, how have we got to this point where we've limited revelation to only prophecy, or limited our relationship with God and him leading us to only when there's a word from a prophet? It's like that's just childish.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I mean, a couple of you are saying laziness. I mean, it could be. I mean, you'll know your own selves. I actually think it's just we've not understood the urgency of the hour, and we've probably not wrestled our fear probably more. Nobody wants to get things wrong. Can I say, I don't want to get things wrong. You don't want to get things wrong. So you probably got a good degree of fear woven into that. And that's an okay thought for like 3 seconds. But then, it's the sense of, what does scripture say? Obedience is better than sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So I do think that we just haven't understood scripture enough. I just got to do it because I have to be obedient.
Come on.
And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter whether I'm scared of man. It actually doesn't really matter. Whether I think I'm trained enough. I'm just obedient.
Come on. Yeah.
There we go. So, riding the storms. Ooh. Well, I'm sorry we giggled and lost the plot halfway through because one of you delightful human beings was talking about spending your victory days in the toilet. So that made us giggle a lot. But bless you. And I love you, but I don't probably want to regroup in a bathroom. So
no.
Somebody bought a cost bag. I saw it. Well done, my favorite shop. Jessica and I were in there the other day. Right. We're still doing Par Hour and we're 10 minutes after. You need to go and we need to go. Ruth or Sam, give us a gorgeous outro.
Thank you for joining us and go and ride the storms. That's what we wanted to say. And remember, you can get Emma's book on our website if you want.
Yes.
Don't miss that. It's the only place you can get a signed copy, actually. So you want to get it on our website, you can get it a month early too. And as well, we've released tickets for Start 2024, right? I think. That is
very organized, aren't we?
So you can get that on our website.
Early bird tickets.
Oh, early bird discount. The man in the corner says it.
So get there fast before the early bird runs out.
Okay, marvelous. We love you. We'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.